Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you, wherever you are. It's a great pleasure for us at the Tata-Cornell Institute to launch our new and inaugural report on food, agriculture, and nutrition in India 2020. We call it FAN 2020. Before I talk about the report and before I talk about organizing this panel, let me first introduce myself. I'm Prabhu Pingali. I'm a professor of applied economics and the founding director of the Tata-Cornell Institute for Agriculture and Nutrition. The Tata-Cornell Institute is based at Cornell University in the College of Agriculture. And our mission is to understand the reasons for this persistence of malnutrition and rural poverty in the developing world, with a particular focus on India, and to determine the options, both technological options, institutional options, and policy options for changing this current situation and improving overall nutrition outcomes and enhancing rural incomes. So that's what our research program does. We have long-term endowment support from the Tata Educational Trust. We have grant support from several global donors, including the Gates Foundation, the Danish government, USAID, and the Walmart Foundation. We currently have about 20 PhD students and around 5 postdoctoral fellows in our program. You can find out a lot more about what the Tata-Cornell Institute does from our website, tci.cornell.edu. Let me tell you a little bit about what to expect for the next hour and a half. So first, I'll make some introductory remarks on the report, after which we'll have the main authors of the report, Andale Brehman and Kiera Crowley, who will present some more details on the report. And after that, I'd like to bring together a panel, a distinguished panel, to talk about the report, give some comments, maybe ask some questions, etc. And I'll introduce the panelists at that particular moment. We're really happy to see such a great group of panelists with us today. After which we'll have a more open discussion and hope to close our events by 9:30 in the evening here, 9:30 in the morning here. That should be around, what, 7 in the evening for you in India. So look forward to a great event. So let me talk about FAN 2020. So as I mentioned, this is our first report on what's happening to food and nutrition in India. And we anticipate we'll have a series of such reports over the years. This particular report looks at the country as a whole. And we look at India and look at the state of food security, the state of nutrition, and the primary role that agriculture plays in addressing this problem. And our report this year is very much focused on SDG 2, the Zero Hunger Goal. We're not going to tell you whether India will achieve the SDG 2 goal or not. What we will tell you is, what does it take to get there? What are some of the necessary changes in overall productivity in agriculture, the necessary changes in access to more nutritious food, the necessary changes in enhancing rural incomes, etc., that will allow us to get to SDG 2. So that's the way we are positioning this report. What's some of the value added from this report? There are lots of reports around this topic. What do we see as the value added here? I think our value added from FAN 2020 is that we position this as a one-stop shop for data and for analysis around the state of hunger and nutrition in India, both at the national level, but going down all the way to the district level. So we've got very detailed maps and detailed discussion that cuts across all scales, from the local all the way to the national. We also provide a detailed discussion on the link between agriculture and nutrition and the crucial role that agriculture plays in enhancing nutrition outcomes. And the central role that agriculture has historically played in India in addressing overall economic growth and enhancing nutrition outcomes. Now, in order to do that, we've actually mapped out very unique cropping system zones in India. And we talk about doubling productivity and doubling incomes in the context of these cropping systems zones, rather than talk more broadly and more generally about doubling income. And we talk about the primary role that agriculture policy plays in addressing overall productivity growth and the persistent malnutrition problem. And I think that's where the uniqueness of this report comes in, bringing all of these factors together. So what are some of the big overview, the big findings that we have from this report? I think right at the start, it's quite clear to most of us in this room today, that while India has made significant overall economic growth, and we've made significant progress on poverty reduction, we continue to lag behind in nutrition outcomes. We continue to lag behind the global community in child stunting, in wasting, in adult malnutrition indicators, especially iron deficit, anemia for women, etc. And that's a situation that we're all aware of, we're all concerned about. But even as we try to grapple with the problems of malnutrition, the undernutrition problem, we're also observing a dramatic rise in obesity in the country. And it's not just an urban problem. It's not just a rich person problem. We're also beginning to see obesity trends in rural areas and obesity trends among the poor. And this coexistence of undernutrition and overnutrition and the rise of non-communicable diseases is a major public health challenge for us. And it needs to be addressed very urgently. In the report, we argue that diet diversity and affordable access to nutritious foods is key to addressing both ends of the nutrition spectrum, the undernutrition and the overnutrition side. In the report also, we provide detailed information on the key role that agriculture has played historically in stimulating economic growth, enhancing the demand for diet diversity, and for achieving positive nutrition outcomes. However, We all know that there's been enormous spatial differences in progress towards hunger reduction. We see that the lagging states of Eastern India are significantly poorer, much more malnourished relative to the more progressive states. It turns out that early investments in agriculture played a big role in the more progressive states in getting them to where they are today. And the Green Revolution story is very clear about that. The Green Revolution story about how the transformation happened in Punjab, in Haryana, and in the southern states of India, etc., is very clear. But a less known story is the cotton oilseed revolution that took place in central India. The cotton and oilseed belt going all the way from Telangana into Gujarat had a very similar transformative effect as productivity of these crops rose. So the challenge for us looking ahead is to say, what are the future opportunities for agriculture productivity growth to continue to enhance overall economic growth and overall poverty reduction and nutrition improvement? And in order to do that, we need to identify those very specific opportunities for enhancing productivity growth by cropping systems. And what we've done in this report is we've mapped out 12 very unique cropping system zones in the country. Some of them you're very familiar with, like the rice wheat zone of the Indo-Gangetic Plain or the intensive rice systems of southern India. But we've looked across where are the core cereal zones, where's the cotton oil seed zones, etc. And Kira Crowley will be talking a lot more about how we did this mapping and what are some of the implications of that work and how does that help us in targeting specific policies, specific interventions to particular cropping systems within the country. In the report, we talk about what do we mean by nutrition sensitive agriculture and how do we get there? I think a nutrition sensitive agriculture has two primary objectives. One objective is to enhance farmer incomes. And the second objective is to enhance the diversity of the food system and enhance the nutritional quality of the food system. And I think it's really important for us to think about a nutrition sensitive agriculture in that connection. And it's really important as we think about enhancing small farm incomes to look not just at the rural economy, but to look at what's happening in terms of urban demand for food, urban demand for diversity of food, and urban demand for higher quality of food. And as we link small farms to these urban markets and this urban demand, that provides a new major growth opportunity for the poor, for smallholder agriculture. And this report talks about the mechanisms such as farmer producer organizations, etc., for getting us there. And that's a really important part of what we look at. Finally, we talk a lot about the multisectoral nature of the malnutrition problem. Our focus has been on agriculture, but we are very well aware and we talk about the connections to nutrition that go beyond agriculture. The role of behavior change, the role of women's empowerment, and how they influence diets at the household level, and how they influence overall nutrition outcomes is very important for us to understand. The role of investments in infrastructure for clean water, for sanitation, for public health infrastructure are equally important. And the challenge has always been to create this multi-sectoral convergence that allows us to meet the nutrition goals. And we talk about some of the challenges around the convergence across sectors, across ministries, across departments. And the challenge of convergence happens at all scales. The convergence problem goes from the village to the district, to the state, to the central level. And that's the challenge that we are facing today. And we talk about how one can address that challenge. Let me stop here and let me invite Andali Brahman to give some more details on the report. Andali, take it away.
Thanks, Prabhu. This was a brilliant overview of what we did in the report. So what I'll do is now is to give you a sense of what we have done in the report. Just give me a moment. I think there's I am on the last slide rather than the initial slide. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we're exactly 10 years away from when the Sustainable Development Goals mature, which is 2030. 2030, so this is a good time to take stock of where we are and what are the challenges which lie ahead in terms of achieving those Sustainable Development Goals. Here in this report, what we did is focus on SDG 2, which is addressing the issue of hunger and nutrition. So SDG 2 explicitly says the aim is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition by 2030. There are a number of sub-goals to it, which talks about how it's important to end hunger. All people should have access to food. There should be food security. But for the first time, what SDG does as a departure from the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, is to talk about agriculture productivity, increasing income, and sustainable food production systems as well. So, okay, let's me get straight to the point of this report, which is about the issue of nutrition. We in India, by and large, agree that India has addressed the issue of hunger in terms of people having access to food, but the challenge right now is about nutrition. Do people get enough nutrition by the kind of food that they eat? Is the most common used metric of malnutrition is the status of child nutrition, children under the age of 5. So if you look at the progress that India has had, it's not actually very such a happy note that we would want to see it, especially during the phase where since 1992 we've seen a lot of decline in poverty, but the number of share of children stunted has declined only little, from 52% to 35%. Similar is the story for underweight and wasting. So malnutrition remains a major challenge in India, and this is what we address in this report through leveraging or through talking about the role of agriculture to understand the issue of malnutrition. So this is, in a sense, is what this report is about. Why the issue of malnutrition important in India? We pretty much know that India lags behind much of the globe, even countries which are further behind India's development trajectory. Their performance on nutrition is better than India. So it's a solid state, and we need concerted action to address the issue of nutrition. Where is the issue of nutrition more acute within India? If you break it down by the rural and urban sector, rural areas being primarily more poor than urban, we see a more high incidence of malnutrition, be it underweight, stunting, or wasting. So the issue of rural malnutrition is pretty important. If we dive deeper into it, even among rural areas, there's a great deal of spatial heterogeneity across the various indicators of malnutrition. Here it's undernutrition. We are talking about stunting, underweight, and wasting among children. This is National Family Health Survey data, recent data, which clearly shows that there is wide heterogeneity, but there are pockets. We pretty much know where the pockets of stunting, underweight, and wasting are. These are regions which are poorer traditionally and haven't had the same transformation that other regions probably which have done better have had. So these are the patterns of undernutrition, but there's increasing problem of now overweight, which what we call the triple burden of malnutrition. There is an increase in the incidence of overweight, especially among men and women in regions where there has been higher growth. So that's the problem. As we mature along the structural transformation process, we get into that problem too. So when we assess the SDGs, we should be mindful of these multiple challenges that face us. I would like to focus a bit on SDG 2.3, the sub-goals, which specifically mentions the role of agricultural productivity and income of small-scale food producers, which is the major challenge in India, because India is largely an agrarian country where most of the households are small-scale farmers if they're practicing agriculture. And how we explain this in the report? Through explaining how subnational patterns kind of explain the connection from agriculture to nutrition. If you look at the pathways from agriculture to nutrition, we have four major pathways, which include household income, how they access food around the year, how food is distributed within the household, and then how much of food consumed is absorbed for better nutritional outcomes. So the idea here in this report is to focus on agriculture as a source of income, as a source of livelihood, as well as a source of food production. And that's what this report, Food, Agriculture, Nutrition in India, talks about. And we specifically say that it's leveraging agriculture to achieve zero hunger. So we bring about the issue of a structural transformation. And Prabhu also mentioned that better gains on nutrition front have been had in regions which invested in agriculture pretty much early in time. And regions which are hotspots of undernutrition are also the regions where we haven't seen much increase in agricultural productivity. To give you an instance, we look at rice yields, probably the most dominant food consumed in India. If you look at the change between late 1960s to early 2010s, we clearly see that productivity gains have been higher in regions, yields are higher in regions which are also better in nutritional aspect. Poverty too is concentrated in the same hotspot regions, which is largely the eastern India. The upper Indo-Gangetic Plain and the southern states have largely done well. They are less poor, they're highly productive, as well as lower on undernutrition. So these are the kind of nuances that we bring about in this report to talk about how spatial patterns of development in India. When we talk about agriculture, we need to be very clear of who we are talking about, who here in the sense of which kind of farmers. India is a country where landholding size have been declining over time as families become bigger and it's distributed to various persons in the family. So a large share of farmers in India are marginal, around 87% based upon the most recent agriculture census. Number of land holdings too have been increasing because of smaller parcels of land. So when we talk about doubling farm income or increasing productivity, we need to understand that we're always talking about smallholders, which too is a part of the sustainable development goals here. Again, this pattern is not uniform across the whole country. There is very clear, variegated patterns across space. So this map basically puts out the change in the share of cultivators by districts between 1960 and 2011. So one can clearly see much of the change has happened in east of India, where the share of cultivators has declined, while the share of agricultural labor has increased. So this also highlights how dependence on agriculture, various forms of livelihood in agriculture has changed. And to address the problem of nutrition, which comes through income as well as production patterns, we need to understand how rural economy is changing. So these are the kind of things that we bring about in this report to tighten it up in arguing how agriculture is central. The key takeaway from the whole report is we talk about the role of agriculture, as we've been emphasizing time and again in the work that we do at TCI, largely that to achieve sustainable development goals, we need to address agriculture. We need to address agriculture because they're linked to all these other pathways that exist towards nutrition. So that's why we need to address this. And how do we address this? That's the important question. How do we look at agriculture? Agriculture definitely is a source of food security, but then food security here means much more than staple grains production, which has been the focus for all these years in India's agricultural and food policy. We need to diversify our diets for the households for better nutritional outcomes. But how does that happen? It doesn't happen unless farmers diversify what they produce. And if they diversify their production system, what also happens is there's ecological sustainability, given we are struggling with the problem. As we go along, that's going to increase more. How do we invest in agriculture again? We need to have better market infrastructure. We need to focus on smallholders. There should be farmer producer organization. There would be better interlinkages for even corporates if they enter, and how they access goods from the farmers, and improved non-farm livelihoods. Synergies across multiple development objects. Sustainable development goals is a gamut of objectives that we need to work upon. Unless there are synergies across these departments, these groups, we are not going to go there. And that's why we need to understand each of these smaller sub-goals to reach there. And most importantly, what we highlight through multiple data that we pull over time and across space for India, we highlight how development patterns have been different. And they've been different for a host of reasons. And one of which is how our agriculture systems are very different across the country, which is what I will leave Kira Crowley to take forward from here. Kira, over to you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending our virtual report launch. As Andalib said, I'm going to be talking a bit about our cropping systems approach to increasing income and productivity that we introduce in our FAN 2020 report. Traditionally, Indian agricultural policy has focused mainly on productivity of rice and wheat, and this has resulted in a large supply of cereals, but lagging supply of more nutritious, micronutrient-rich foods. It's also only benefited farmers in areas like Punjab and Haryana, where investment in infrastructure like irrigation and electricity allowed the high-yielding varieties of the Green Revolution to flourish. Given India's diversity of cropping systems, we argue that there is a need to tailor productivity increasing approaches to these individual cropping systems. This will not only help to increase the diversity of the food system in India, but it will also help farmers across India to increase their incomes if we focus not only on the rice wheat system, but on all of the systems across India. In order to start thinking about this cropping systems approach to increasing productivity and incomes, we needed to first create a map of cropping systems across India. No such map with current data existed, so we had to create our own map. And we used the crop area data from the ICRISAT TCI district level database to determine the dominant crop by area in each district. We also used a secondary crop where relevant, for example, in the rice wheat systems and the rice systems. Altogether, we came up with 12 unique cropping systems, which you can see depicted here in this map. In our report, we focused on 3 cropping system zones that make up the majority of India's geographic area. The first is the rice wheat systems, then the rice systems of Eastern India, and finally the cotton and oilseed systems of Western and Central India. So I'll give you a brief overview of each of these cropping systems. In the rice wheat system of the Indo-Gangetic Plain, the eastern and western regions will require different approaches for increasing productivity and incomes. In the west, yields are already very high, but groundwater is running out. In the east, yields are low, largely because of poor agricultural infrastructure and less favorable agroclimatic conditions. Both regions would benefit from a shift to less water-intensive crops and adopting more sustainable practices. In the East, investment in infrastructure is also necessary. Investment in irrigation and electricity especially is necessary to increasing productivity in that region. In addition, in both regions, shifting to high-value crops could be an important strategy for farmers. Next, I'll talk about the rice systems of Eastern India. First, the rice fallow systems, which you can see in the lightest color teal, in Odisha and Chhattisgarh. Here, the yields are low and irrigation is limited. We argue that adding a crop during the Rabi or winter season would do a lot in this region for increasing productivity. In the rice systems in Tamil Nadu and West Bengal, yields are already high, but similar to in the Western Indo-Gangetic Plain, water is running out. So there's a need there to switch to higher value, less water intensive crops. In the cotton and oilseed systems, yields are still far below potential. So we need to pursue new agronomic strategies to increase yields in those regions and to increase water use efficiency. Finally, opportunity exists across all cropping systems for adopting pulses and coarse cereals. Pulses and coarse cereals have largely been pushed out by rice and wheat over the last 50, 60 years. And there's a good argument for bringing them back. They have high nutritive value, and they're also, it's possible to grow these crops with limited irrigation. So we really argue, and there's also increased interest among consumers in some of these products. So we argue that it is very important to increase production of pulses and coarse cereals. And in order to do this, there's a need to strengthen delivery systems of quality seeds, to implement crop insurance, and to support farmer producer organizations. So this cropping systems map, again, is the only one of its kind that categorizes current cropping systems in India. And we hope that it will be useful to policymakers as they strive to increase productivity, not only in the rice wheat belt, but across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiera and Andali. Great presentations and a great overview of the report. Now we come to the next section of this program, and that is to have a panel discussion from a very distinguished panel that has kindly agreed to be part of this discussion today. We've got Ramesh Chand from NITI Aayog, Dr. Mohapatra from ICAR, Jackie Hughes, the new Director General of ICRISAT. She's still sitting at Erie waiting for a visa and a plane to arrive in India, but she's working very actively as the Director General from the Philippines right now. She'll be talking to us. We were expecting Purvi Mehta from the Gates Foundation to also be with us, but she's been called into a meeting, but she hopes to be back here before the end of our program, and we certainly hope we can hear from her. In addition, I've invited two discussion openers, Melinda Gates from IGIDR and Avinash Kishore from IFPRI. So let me start and give the floor to Ramesh Chand from NITI Aayog. Ramesh, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu, panelists and participants. I'm really very happy to be part of this report release today for several reasons, but for sake of time, I will not go into those. Many of you would be aware that Prabhu is a veteran in this field and he has been working on these issues for a very, very long time. So his input and his guidance to the young researcher who prepared this report is clearly visible that they have gone into depth. They have looked at policy, they have looked at other aspects and many other things. I think the authors have already talked about the report. I will not talk much about the report, but I would like to share with you some of the issues which are related to the theme of this report and which I feel are also important to understand nutrition status in India. First of all, I want to say that India's nutritional problem is much more complex than you see it in the other countries. In many other countries, what has been theorized that as income will grow, as food production will grow, nutrition will happen in a particular manner. But that has been defied in the case of India. Many of the experience of many other countries that has been defied in the case of India. And those of you who keep track of this development might have read in FAO report that India is an enigma as far as food and nutrition security is concerned. India is a puzzle as far as this thing is concerned. So by this puzzle, despite the fact that food and nutrition have remained one of the top priorities of all successive governments since the beginning of plan development, even before Green Revolution. You pick up first 5-year plan onwards, you just find that there is a mention of food security, nutrition security, improved food in all 5-year plan and in all development documents of this country. So it's not that government has not been serious. They have been taking measures based on advice of experts from time to time. But still, when you look at the nutrition indicators, India is always shown in poor light. And sometimes people will show that India comes only next to sub-Saharan Africa. India's child health index are worse than even neighboring Bangladesh and Nepal, where per capita income is much lower than what it is compared to India. So in this background, I feel that we have been misled by the changes which have happened on supply side of food, and we have not paid enough attention to some of the demand side factors. Because if I look at supply side factors, I should be swayed to say that India is a country where you see no reason why child nutrition should not improve, why still, according to FAO, 15% people are hungry and undernourished, but according to independent researchers, like the paper written by Deaton and Yandres, the population that is undernourished is not 16, 17%, it goes to 60%. So it is in my papers also. So from supply side, certain things which you said in the report should happen in future so that India's nutrition improves. They have already happened, but we did not see commensurate improvement in nutrition. So we need to look at it. Like your report talk about increase in food production, increase in per capita food availability. If you look at aggregate per capita food production in India between 2001 and 2018, it has increased from 1.25 kg to 1.8 kg. A big increase in per capita production of aggregate food in India in just 18 years. So that is quantity in terms of quantity. Now I come to second mention about which your report talk about diversified diet, diversification, that is composition of food. If I look at again composition of production, you just find that even though government was giving support to cereals, mainly rice and wheat, but the growth rate in many other crops and agriculture products has been much, much larger than what has been the growth rate in rice and wheat in the case of India. In just if I share some statistics with you, in the beginning of 20th century, India produced 10% more cereal than what was the production of fruit and vegetable. But today, India is producing 50% more fruit and vegetable compared to what is production of cereals in the case of India. So just this belief as if India has not been paying attention to non-cereal diets is not borne out by the fact. We must see to it that growth rate in fruit and vegetable has been at least 50% more than what was the growth rate in production of cereals. Even if you keep cereal, rice and wheat, the growth rate in fruit and vegetable has been higher than what is the growth rate in rice and wheat. Similarly, if you pick up animal diet, livestock output, milk, egg, meat, fish, you just find that their growth rate has been even higher than what is the growth rate in fruit and vegetables. Then the NSO data also shows us that if we look at the consumption side, per capita consumption, except cereal and pulses you see some decline because of availability reason, but of fruit and vegetable, livestock product, it has increased at a much sharper rate than what was the increase in the intake of staple food. And also overall availability, India is currently exporting 8% of its food production, physical food production, that goes as export. When it comes to government policies, you just find that even now we came with this life cycle approach toward nutrition. We have a portion so that soon after a woman is in the child-bearing stage, some sort of economic assistance is given from the time of conception of a child till the child attains certain age. So you just find that those kind of support is also there. Then in terms of public distribution system, I think, I don't remember which other country sells through public distribution system staple food at 1/10 of what is the open market price. Open market price of wheat is 24 rupees a kg. We are giving at 2 rupees a kg. Rice is 30 rupees a kg and we are giving at 3 rupees a kg to as much as 2/3 of the total population, which is meeting nearly 40% intake of cereals by that population. So you can imagine that 40% food people are getting, 2/3 of population is getting just at a throwaway price. So as far as per capita income is concerned, again, during last 2 decades, per capita income has increased by 2.2 times. At aggregate level, even if there are income inequalities, income increase has happened even in case of bottom category. So despite all these positive changes, what is missing? Why India's nutrition has not been improving when supply side factors have been so favorable, policies have been so supportive, why it has not been happening? A few things come to my mind. Prabhu, how much time I have? I should not be taking more time than what you might have planned for me.
Maybe another minute, Ramesh.
Oh, another minute. Okay, okay. Then I will only list, I will not elaborate on those aspects. I think one is awareness about nutrition, nutrition literacy. It is very, very poor in the case of India. Second is, your report also talked about it, that is WASH, WASH, clean water, sanitation and hygiene, very, very important. Again, because nutrition literacy is poor, there is a strong advertisement effect. So Indian diet, you find, is moving towards spicy food, oily food, and sweet food rather than nutritive food. Again, there are so many factors I can't go into all those kind of things. So I find that this report has tried to address some of these puzzles. I particularly find your district level analysis through maps very, very revealing. We have such big states and there is so much diversity within the states that if you start making comparison across the states, you are lost. Like you take Uttar Pradesh, Western UP will be similar to what is Punjab. Eastern UP will be very bad. You just find. So going to districts, that's why we had that aspirational districts program. Now we are talking of aspirational block program. So going to that, this aggregate level is very, very important. Your report has talked about leveraging with agriculture. I find agriculture lever is important, but I feel there are many other levers which are very, very important. One is primary health care. India spend very less on primary health care, and that becomes a factor when you are talking about this child nutrition and those kind of things. Another factor is governance. You just find that with same kind of income level across household, the situation of nutrition in Bihar and Eastern UP will be different than what you will find the situation of nutrition in the case of Kerala and in other cases. So you just find in many states PDS doing so well, midday meal doing so well, but in some other states neither PDS is doing well, nor midday meal scheme is doing well. So role of governance very, very important. And there are also cultural factors. In one of my paper, I wrote about choices of people. There are many people in India who by choice are not consuming adequate nutrition. I have a keynote paper in Indian Journal of Agriculture Economics where I elaborated and I called it voluntary hunger. That is in culture of India. I have no time to say it. And lastly, I would say that this report provides comprehensive understanding of nutrition connect with agriculture, but full story of nutrition will emerge when you will see the connect of nutrition with non-agricultural factors. Agriculture matter at macro level, but at household level, there are many other factors which matter. Income is one, and so many other kind of things are important. And today, even in rural India, 70% of income is coming from non-agriculture sources. It doesn't come from agriculture. In your report, you cited a reference which said 50%, but I have empirical estimate. It was 35 and 12. You project it, now it is 30%. So that non-agriculture, non-farm employment, these becomes very, very important. So it is a complex issue, as I said in the beginning. There are so many other things, but I should respect time. Sorry, Prabhu, I exceeded the allotted time by 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ramesh. That was a really excellent set of comments, very insightful. And I have to really appreciate the fact that much of those insights come from you as a researcher who's now doing policy decision making. It's that connection, I think, that gives you these very unique insights. Thank you so much. Let me very quickly bring in Dr. Mohapatra, the Director General of ICAR. He's squeezing us in between two meetings that are happening. So take it away, Dr. Mohapatra. Mute. You're muted.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, Dr. Prabhu, and thanks other colleagues who are present here, and particularly the authors of this particular report, and other panelists, Professor Ramesh Chand, Dr. Purvi, Dr. Jackie Hughes, and others who are present and joined this particular webinar. I find more than 30 experts and maybe my own colleagues. They are linked to this particular program today. I had earlier I didn't have any meetings, and somehow today there are two meetings fixed at 6 o'clock, one 6:30, another. So I couldn't really avoid those, and I have to again quickly move to the next meeting. But I think at the outset, let me say that whatever I could listen Professor Ramesh Chand very briefly, and he has given excellent viewpoints, elaborating on various facets and very critically also. The initial presentations I could hear about the report, your introductory remarks, Dr. Prabhu, and subsequently the crop diversification, as well as the status of the situation in India with regard to malnutrition and so on and so forth. So I heard about that and then subsequently move on to other meeting. Let me say that as Professor Ramesh Chand said, that's a very well written, comprehensive report on the status of India, the nutrition, particularly how food and agriculture and nutrition in India, how it can be leveraged to eliminate hunger. The sustainable development goals are there before us. I don't want to really repeat. It has been very well described in the report, and all of us almost routinely talk about this, that we have to achieve by 2030. Not easy for a country like India, having the kind of complexity and diversity that we have in terms of socio-economy, in terms of literacy, in terms of poverty, and in terms of the technology penetration that has happened and which is quite differentiated. So that makes this situation, and diversity of agroclimate, of course, and makes it a complex scenario. But then we have been striving hard to achieve this. As it was mentioned, we have not really progressed very well with regard to nutrition. Whether it is stunting or wasting or all that which are presented, and all of us know that the progress is there, but it's a very slow progress. So what is that actually, we have been trying, how we are trying to address? I very briefly mentioned about a few points, and then leave other points, other aspects to my fellow panelists to actually elaborate on. Have we really done well with regard to production? So with regard to production, if we see in terms of cereals, it was mentioned, we have done a fairly good job, more than 5.5%, 5 times increase as compared to 1950-51. It's a long period. But what is important is we are feeding 1.3 billion plus population, and even during COVID, it's all free food to all those who are needed. And that's a very remarkable situation. And we had plenty in our store to do that, and exporting. So that's a very fairly satisfying situation that we are able to produce enough despite the climate change limitations, frequent flash floods coming in, droughts coming in certain patches, and almost every year. Though we will have normal rainfall in the country, but there will be certain regions which will be impacted by drought. So all these are happening on regular features. Natural calamities in eastern India, the cyclones, the regular feature. So despite all that, and salinity, particularly coastal salinity and inland salinity increasing. So these are all features and negative developments which are there, but still, despite all that, we have been able to really produce that much. So that's one point I would like to make. And making available at the time of need, for instance, during COVID, and that's again a satisfying moment that we have enough food in store to put grain in store to provide free to anyone who needs. So, and this year, 1920, the food grain production going to all-time high, 295 plus million tons. That's something which is very remarkable, and obviously, so much of food grain, particularly rice, wheat, given the consumption pattern, as there is a decline of this, energy, consumption, in terms of cereal consumption. So probably, there's a need to really diversify, which was already mentioned. And what is our efforts actually? If you see that the staple food system, though we have plenty and we are consuming, but do they address the nutrition aspects adequately? Probably not. And that's the issue. And, what is our effort in this direction is to have more of a biofortified varieties in these crops, whether it is wheat or rice, fortified with zinc, fortified with iron, fortified with more of proteins in case of rice, and so on and so forth, so that the hidden hunger, which is the main region of this, is addressed. But they are yet to go to the field adequately. I mean, there is some progress, but there's a long distance to actually travel in that particular front. So they need to be really mainstream, and that mainstream has to happen. The segregated market, the seed production system, the pricing system, the MSP system. So quite a bit of, even if there is no MSP, the market system has to really take care of that. And this needs to be really worked out. And that's a huge effort which is required. So this is one area. It's not only in cereals, in other crops also, we are focusing more than 50 biofortified crop varieties during past 3-4 years we have developed. And there's a need to really mainstream them to have greater nutrition outcomes. So this is one point which I need to emphasize. And this can actually greatly contribute to nutrition deficiencies and addressing those deficiencies. The second aspect is that we had more focus on millets. In recent years, mainstreaming millets has been our focus, declaring them as nutri-cereals, branding them as nutri-cereals, and then promoting them through appropriate value chain models, and then creating startups, creating production groups, linking them together. So new varieties, biofortified varieties in the process, the highly enriched for zinc, iron, and so on and so forth. And they were already reached, and we have further enhanced those levels. So this is another area where we have done quite a bit of work and developed new varieties and mainstream those by way of bringing a mindset change and bringing a change in philosophy that they are not good, and they were neglected because the whole philosophy was wheat and rice, they're rich person's diet, and these millets were poor person's diet. That's the kind of of thinking which was already built, and that is going to be demolished slowly over a period of time as we really continue promoting nutri-cereals, branding them, and then establishing more and more of these value chains. And state governments are coming forward to provide those through their systems of distribution. So, and in 1920, we have all-time high production of these nutri-cereals, more than 47 million tons of those. And ICRISAT disease here. So I think they have also supported this particular program. So this is another area where we have have to mainstream them further so that our consumption increases with regard to the millets or nutri-cereals, so that the malnutrition is addressed. The third area, which India has been actually very fortunate to have huge food diversity, what we call culinary diversity. Professor Ramesh Chand keeps talking about it. And how do we really, go back to this culinary diversity? Over a period of time, our food habits are constricted, become more and more limited. One or two items earlier, around one particular plate, there will be 10 different items of food. And that used to actually provide varied kind of nutrients. There will be something of greens, something of different kinds of gourd family, and something of root family. So it's a kind of diversified food which used to be really eaten. And so now we have to really promote that. What we have actually done in Madhya Pradesh, one central state of in the central region, is one state of India. And we have promoted a system called Nutri Thali. That plate is called Thali. And we have promoted Nutri Thali system. And Nutri Thali along with Nutri Gardens. So the kitchen gardens are the Nutri Gardens, where all different kinds of vegetables are grown, fruits are grown and promoted, and recommendations are made. There are several models prepared, and they are being promoted. In Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, we have developed these models. Our Krishi Vigyan Kendra, the farm science centers in every district, they have done. And I'm sure once they actually mainstream in areas, particularly where nutrition is a serious concern, and we should be able to actually promote consumption. But this is one serious issue. Unless we promote consumption, because farmers often produce, for instance, they produce milk, hardly they save anything for their own consumption. So there are many examples of like this, because our food habits are actually, they are very different in, which have been really, seen in different regions. So this needs to be really, done. And this is a big task for us to really enter into that. And that's what we are doing. And along with the Women and Child Development Ministry, we are, through Poshan Abhijan, this nutrition, program, we are trying to again promote these Nutri Gardens and Nutri Thali. The models we have built, they are going to go to all the parts of the country, and hopefully the consumption, by way of that, there will be more of consciousness, awareness building in, and then the consumers are made aware of Nutri Thali and what are the components of their daily diet system that need to be really consumed. And through a mass awareness program through our KBK, we are trying to promote this. And this is another way that we can address this. Having accepted that these are the facts, these are the problems, probably this need to be really done. But not just food system, we are promoting integrated farming system models. 85% of our farmers are small and marginal. When you say small, these integrated farming system models, they're actually integrated, nutrition gardens actually. They are, there is a small scale fishery wherever water is available. There is animal production systems, particularly dairy, and horticulture, and then field crop systems. They're all integrated. And these models which we have developed, more than 51 of them is being promoted through this. The Tamil Nadu, they have implemented in farmers' field more than 15,000 integrated farming systems, based on these models which we have developed. And similarly, Kerala, they have also 7,000 of these that are already there in farmers' field. So large-scale multiplication of those, and we have bankable models. So the NABARD is coming forward. We had detailed discussion, is coming forward to promote them so that the integrated farming system models, farming system for nutrition models particularly, they are mainstream, they are encouraged, and that will promote not only production, but also consumption. So small and marginal farmers, when they will have that kind of produce, they will consume, and then they will also go for marketing, whatever they say. So these are the kind of areas where the Indian Council of Agriculture Research and also the Ministry of Agriculture, and a lot of schemes have been brought about. And you know about the pulses revolution. This has been because the large number of vegetarian consumers are here in this country, and the pulses revolution recent years has been a very success story. And we don't really describe in adequate terms, this particular revolution. 6 to 7 million tons jump in just 1 year as compared to previous years, and we continue holding on to that. And 1920 again 23 million tons production, and previous years in 1 year we had about 25 million tons of production. So we are still having shortage of close to 1.5 million tons, but we have improved very significantly. And this is where we are trying to adequately address the consumption also pulses which is required, and then address the malnutrition. So there are some of the measures, the supply side and demand side, there are issues. We don't say that we have solved all the problems, and we have to really intensify our efforts further to really address this problem. So I have already taken more time, and there are other points to speak, but I can't given my time limitation. So I beg excuse, and there are other speakers, certainly they will cover many other areas which I'm really leaving. And also Dr. Prabhu, thank you very much. I'm extremely sorry that I have another urgent meeting to attend, so I'll not be able to really spend more time and also cover other aspects which I had in my mind. So, but then Dr. Ramesh Chand has given a broader perspective. And so with this, I stop here, and thank you very much. And thanks to all the panelists, thanks to all the authors, and congratulations for bringing out this particular volume. That will be certainly excellent volume for all of us to take guidance and also learn from the status, so that we plan our future action points appropriately. And this is a very good effort. And then Tata-Cornell Institute deserves appreciation. Dr. Prabhu deserves appreciation. Dr. Prabhu, congratulations. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Mohapatra. Thanks a lot for juggling your schedule so that you could be here, even just for a little while. And thanks for your very great comments and great insights on the report. I'm really delighted that Dr. Purvi Mehta from Gates Foundation has managed to finish her other engagement and to be able to join in. So without further ado, let me invite her to give her comments.
Thank you very much, and sorry about this bit of a inordinate drama. sorry to join late, but big congratulations to you, Professor Pingali, for the FAN 22. I think it's a very appropriate name. We're all becoming fans of it, I think. Congratulations to all the entire team of Tata-Cornell, which has worked on it. I looked at the report and a couple of points. Of course, Professor Chand had some excellent points on the report. Let me sort of leverage upon that and bring in a few. Number one is, I think, this is going to be a very, very important centralized data source. Frankly, there is, in many ways, no dearth of agriculture data in India, right? There are a very large number of agriculture data available on one hand. On the other hand, there are large number of institutes which have been collecting nutrition-related data also, but mainly from a health perspective. So this kind of a data source was really very needed to sort of bridge the nutrition data and the agriculture data. So thank you very much for bringing that, and especially the way it very interestingly brings the links not only about the food systems or leveraging agriculture for nutrition, but also the links between or the lack of links between production, GDP growth, availability of food, absorption of food, and the various diversities and sort of disparities that it talks about. For example, Professor Chand spoke about, staple, non-staple, but also, the district level and within the region, the kind of diversities that we see in that is very, very interesting. I thought, it brings in a very interesting perspective, because whenever we explain food systems in general, we always say that, agriculture is not the only influencing factor for any malnutrition challenge, or food availability is not. There are many other factors, agriculture being one of the very strong ones, but there are many other factors like health standards of the country, water and sanitation, access to drinking water, and so forth, right? In many ways, this report kind of brings all of that together, which I think is pretty unique. So thank you very much for that, and I especially appreciated the rural, urban, and also the whole gender dimension to the whole thing, which was. But I really feel that this report is especially important in the current context of when this report is getting released, and how we are challenged with a rather new set of puzzle on nutrition and, of course, agriculture, given the COVID situation. The IMF's recent projection that the world, the global GDP has gone down by about 5%. We know our past modeling work, right, that 10% contraction in global GDP would push about 170 million people right now into extreme poverty, right? So the GDP will have, a much larger impact on, of course, people's household income, especially the poor's household income. And we know also that, we have evidences from around the world that when the household income level goes down, there are two things that gets severely compromised. First, number one is the access to health, and number two is access to nutrition, both of course very, very well linked. And therefore I think, given this initiative and given this report, it might be very interesting to bring in this kind of a holistic way of looking at the whole nutrition area in the context of the current situation. From both angles, availability and access, right? I mean, availability, by that I mean, is the food supply adequate? And is it adequately diversified? But not in a traditional sense, the question that we would have asked perhaps 2 years ago, but in the modern sense or in the current sense, whether this is, because we know the variations of impact that we've seen, commodity-wise variations that we've seen. For example, Dr. Mohapatra was just talking about how India has really not let its large food production come down, right? And in fact, agriculture has done better actually, right? So in the context of that, but at the same time, some of the commodities, for example, animal sourced food, poultry, for example, which serves as perhaps one of the largest source of protein for many communities in the country, right, has been affected in a very, very bad way in terms of, the poultry production going down to about 68% in certain states. So in the context of availability, not asking the traditional question, and by traditional, I mean just 2 years ago, the question that we would have asked, but in the present context. But at the same time, access not just because of the impact on income, which I said, GDP will have, but at the same time, the supply chain disruption. It is very interesting. There is a IMF study that's going on right now, which is looking at supply chain disruptions and its impact on nutrition due to COVID, right? So they've taken last 4 or 5 months data and they are evaluating that. I really feel, and Professor Chand, we should perhaps discuss. I would like your guidance on how to take this. But I think supply chain disruption has been very, very different and differently managed in different countries. For example, a supply chain disruptions since the COVID crisis started, which they counted as mid-March till now, in many countries have been measured as a 3 months disruption or a 2.5 months disruption. Whereas in India, that disruption cycle was much shorter. I'm not saying there was no disruption, there was disruption, but the correction of that disruption had started much faster. So in India, depending upon the state, the correction of the disruption happened anywhere between 11 days to 21 days, which I thought was very rapid. And there are many factors to that, right? It was a harvest season, which not many countries had. It was a peak harvest season in most parts of the country. Food availability at the ground level was there, right? And so the issues that we had, and the reason I focus on India is because your report focuses on India, were very, very different. So given the Indian context, given that the supply chain disruptions with, of course, variations had relatively lower impact, and also that it was the seasonality, which your report, Professor Pingali, also says, and you've published very, very much on the seasonal impact on nutrition, right? So I think in the context of COVID, that might be a very, very interesting thing to look at. But the third point I wanted to make generally is also the stability. I think often a lot of our food systems work, that is agriculture, nutrition work, does talk about access and affordability, but stability is something that's going to be very, very important. I mean, access to access to food during when? Is that when during the research project, or so what is the sustainability of food supply is something that that needs to be really, because nutrition or correcting the nutrition levels in communities at household level is a long-standing issue. So for how many seasons does that stable supply of food is to be done is something that needs to be done. But also in the context of COVID, we know right now that 110 countries across the world in last 4 months have rolled out major, India of course is one of them, social protection measures where food supply has become, of course, a very, very important aspect of it. But if you see majority of the countries, India again is an exception in that, but majority of the countries, the food supply has been assured for 65 days. And therefore, what is there perhaps will be a major dip in the access to food as soon as that gets over. So I think there are some very interesting research questions that one can leverage upon. I just wanted to bring in 2 more points. One is the food security during a health crisis. I think, this whole area of what is the impact of lack of food or lack of diversified diet or lack of nutrition or the current malnutrition level on people's immunity and therefore their resilience towards any of the health crises, I think will bring a very, very interesting angle. For example, do farmers with diversified commodities, right, are they becoming more resilient to certain diseases? Those are some of the questions that might be very interesting. And the second point, of course, while you do very adequately speak about WASH, water and sanitation, and all of that, one must remember, or we need to remind ourselves, that the whole COVID crisis has started as a sort of a zoonotic disease angle, right? And so therefore agriculture does, even if it started as a health crisis, agriculture does play a very, very important role. And given the dairy intensification, given how animal source food and livestock sector is for nutrition sector, and also given the fact that 70% of the emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic in nature, zoonosis' impact on nutrition and vice versa would be very interesting to study as well. So thank you very much. I just wanted to say this is a very, very timely report, and it kind of helps us understand a lot of the big missing pieces in the puzzle as we look at it. So thank you very much, and thanks for the initiative for doing this report as well.
Thank you, Purvi. That great set of comments. Thanks for squeezing us in between your meetings also. Just one point on the supply chain issues. And you very rightly point out that the supply chain effects were quite small in India during this COVID time period. And there's a report on our website on COVID prices in the major metros, in 11 metros around the country. And we've tracked what happened to food prices across all major food groups from mid-March till the end of June. So I think that provides a lot of data to look at that particular question on the supply chain effects also. So our last panelist here is Dr. Jackie Hughes. Jackie is the Director General of ICRISAT, just starting her position as the Director General. She's still in the Philippines trying to come into India, as I mentioned, but she's hard at work even from there, and it's almost middle of the night there. So Jackie, Let's hear from you.
Thank you, Prabhu. First of all, I'd like to commend the team that put together this report. As Purvi and others have been saying, very, very timely, and the level of detail across India, it's absolutely stunning to see and will become one of my key references anyway. If I could take us back to the number of undernourished in India, it's about 194 million, 14% of the population. An equal or slightly larger percentage are obese, but of the rest, about 80% of them have hidden hunger, the micronutrient malnutrition. And it's not just zinc and iron, it's calcium, it's vitamin B6, B12, folate, lysine, vitamin A. So how do we address all of this hidden hunger? You've heard touches of how we can do it. I'm very passionate about it. I will focus on agriculture. However, there are two other facets to the pyramid: education, wash, sanitation, and hygiene. And at the apex, doubling farmers' incomes and achieving Sustainable Development Goal 2. If I could just touch on education, it's letting people know what they should be eating and why they should be eating it, and how to prepare the food, how to consume it. The focus should probably be on children first, and let them educate their parents when they find food that they like. But then again, the Nutri-Thali that Dr. Mohapatra was talking about is also a good way to move forwards in that area. For sanitation and hygiene, hand washing and all of that, but why? It's partly to minimize the transgenerational consequences of malnutrition, and to ensure that we don't have that cognitive reduction in the generations to come. Immunity too, as Purvi was saying, boosting immunity. So we need to address micronutrient malnutrition. And we've heard about the rice wheat, rice systems, and I'd like to look at 3 points. Diversifying those food systems. I believe very strongly in a diverse diet to overcome the issues of malnutrition. Also looking at higher yields of those nutritious crops, and then managing risk. So as we look at for example, the rice wheat systems, very important, and the Green Revolution helped boost the calories, absolutely vital. And you've been hearing today how there is enough food around, it's available. Over 60 days worth of food is there, available. But how can we more address nutrition? And I would go back to those coarse grains, the pulses, fruits and vegetables, and the animal products that we were hearing about just now. For the coarse grains, for example, sorghum, millet, remember that in addition to the nutritional content, they can grow with less water at higher temperatures and in poorer soils than many of the rice and wheat varieties today. If we look at pulses, Dr. Mohapatra was talking about successes there, chickpea, pigeon pea, lentils, for example. Not only do they provide nitrogen protein to us, but nitrogen fixation and soil improvement as well. Fruits and vegetables, we were hearing from Dr. Ramesh Chand about those high value crops, high micronutrient content in many cases. And then animal products, fish, eggs, milk, chicken, as Purvi was saying. Linked all with those high value crops, the animal products, you can bring in women's empowerment, assuring the diversity in the diets by helping produce a diverse diet, and also making sure that the family eats it. For higher yields, the Green Revolution did a lot for the staples, rice and wheat in India. But for the coarse grains, the pulses and other crops, we need to improve those crops. Increase the genetic gain, increasing the yields, hybrids, for example. We need to make those improvements. Otherwise, those crops may stay the poor man's crop. They should not be. They're highly nutritious. They're very accommodating to the environment. And we have to be able to ensure that the farmers and the consumers understand what's in it for them. It's good food. It's, well, more readily produced food. But instead of just higher yield, diverse production systems, can we also look at total productivity from an area of land? It means looking at the crop durations. Rice, wheat, yes, but rice, wheat, pulse. There is time in a rotation to get that third crop in, or to get in a second crop where it's a single crop production system. The crops can use residual water. You have to manage the whole production system. And then my pet area in a way is managing risk. Farmers are risk averse. They should be risk averse. Their whole lives and livelihoods depend on the soil and what they can grow. They have to manage the risks of inputs. So they need to be able to get seed, quality seed, water, fertilizers wherever they can. They have to make sure that their time, the labor, and the cost, the financial cost, is taken into account and not lost. We don't want any environmental impacts to growing these crops and the inputs we use. There is a risk from climate change and climatic events. How can we manage that? I would put to you that perhaps growing coarse grains that are less prone to some of these environmental changes, less prone to water deficit situations and some of the diseases, is a good way to have some buffering in the production system. We haven't heard much about post-harvest losses either. The farmers can get very frustrated, and it's a huge risk. You grow a crop or several crops in your system, and then you don't have the right infrastructure, you don't have the right information. The value chains might be broken, the market chains not functioning. How can we make sure we can minimize those risks while we make all those other changes? So to finally summarize what I'm so passionate about here, let's get the agriculture working right for the farmers and the consumers. Make sure the education is there. Make sure those health aspects are taken into account together. They can't work individually. They have to be linked together. With all of those working together, we will be in a position to not only double the farmer's income, but assure that India will meet its SDG 2 targets. So thank you, Prabhu. That's what I wanted to share with you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie. Great comments, especially bringing up the risk issues and the connections to climate change. We obviously did not deal with that in this report as much, but it's an area where I think a lot more attention needs to be paid. Also, I'm sure you heard Dr. Mohapatra talk about mainstreaming millets. So that must be good news for you coming into ICRISAT, and that would be a mission for ICRISAT moving forward. So thank you so much. So now I've got two speakers I'd like to have open up the discussion. I'm hoping we'll still have some time for a few questions. We're already at 9:30 my time, so it should be about 7 p.m. for you, but I'm hoping some of you can still participate in the discussion. I've requested Professor Melinda Gates from ICIDR and Avinash Kishore from IFPRI to make a few comments as we open up. So Mahendra, on to you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, it's a great report. I compliment Prabhu, Andalib, and Kaira for, I agree with the, particularly the executive summary. You have given all 10 points. They're very good. The first one is, of course, the, poverty and nutrition. India has done well in poverty removal, but poverty reduction. But in nutrition, the SDG 2, you have to make a lot of effort. Particularly, undernourishment is fine, I mean, the calories, but the stunting and other things, you have to make a lot of effort. I feel that we may not get also if you don't make efforts by 2030. And another one is you also mentioned, apart from undernutrition, obesity. I think that probably even the panelists didn't touch much on the thing because it is increasing very significantly, the obesity thing. Probably a chapter may be needed, next one, the next report or something on what are the things to be done to reduce obesity. And then I come to the dilemma, which Ramesh Chand also mentioned. He says supply is increasing for this diversification is happening, but I feel that maybe your cropping systems may help in some of these dilemmas. Which cropping systems has more the outcomes, nutrition outcomes. When you link those things, so some of the things in the demand side factors may come up in that. So I like your cropping systems thing, but also, the affordability. We know that Eat Lancet, the diet, many of the, some studies by PRI show that nearly 1.5 billion can't afford this diet. So, eggs, the meat and the fish and many other things, maybe there is some problem of availability and affordability. So that, for example, even in rural areas, you get processed foods, but not vegetables and fruits and, fruits and other things. Availability is also a problem. And even on millets, if you see urban areas, the middle class and rich are eating now millets, not the poor, because its prices are quite high. So this affordability, I think that is important. Although I agree with you, your agriculture pathways, the diversification has led to diet. Diversification of cropping system has led to diversified diet. Even our Spandan data shows that diversification led to diversified diet, but not linked to nutrition. So there is also some gap. Even if you have diversified diet, why nutrition indicators are not happening? So other factors maybe like education and other things may come up here. And also kitchen gardens, our Spandan data showed that kitchen gardens helped even the nutrition indicators because of availability of fruits, vegetables in our kitchen gardens. And then, so this puzzle of the supply side factors and demand side, maybe at the regional and district level, you can solve that by linking these things. I liked your structural transformation. In fact, as Ramesh Chand mentioned, non-agriculture is becoming important in rural areas. Almost 60-70% income is, you have a chapter on non-agriculture linkages I've seen. But that I think even MSMEs and those manufacturing and services and urban linkages are becoming very important. So I'll take 1 or 2 minutes more. One thing is, Prabhu always talks about data. Still, we have a lot of data gaps in that, particularly consumption patterns. The last one available in India is 2011-12. We don't have any consumption patterns after that. It's a shame that we still have to work on 2011-12 data, because 2017-18 consumption data, because of problems government did not release. So we are still dealing with that. So what is happened to calories, the other micronutrients, pulses, consumption, we don't know across things. Other one is the inequalities, regional disparities are very good in this report, but also why this supply demand problem, the inequalities are increasing. Although poverty declined, but inequalities are increasing. So maybe more the bottom people are not getting that much, although their income increased, but still they may not be able to afford this diversified diet. So one has to link with the inequalities question. Lastly, 1 or 2 things. women you have mentioned, but one problem now is that women's work participation rates are declining, particularly in rural areas. It declined from 48% in 2004-5 to 2017-18, 22%, 22-23%. So women's contribution, those things, how, if you don't work for remuneration, what will happen, the impact. Lastly, on social protection, I think you've not touched much. The PDS, MG Narega, midday meal schemes, ICDS, which contributed to the nutrition of children particularly. And even MG Narega created assets. For example, employment guarantee scheme in Maharashtra led to horticulture revolution. So these can create assets for agriculture and non-agriculture construction. So these social protection are equally important for nutrition indicators that what we may have to indicate. And lastly, food safety and those issues are becoming much important now after COVID. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mahendra. Thanks for also bringing up my very passionate subject on data. Data shortage, data access, and most importantly, data transparency. I think we really need to work hard on getting that sorted out. So thank you. Let me now invite Avinash Kishore for his comments, and then I'd like to see if we can open up for a broader conversation. Avinash.
Thanks, Prabhu. Yeah, I haven't fully read the report. I checked with Prabhu and focused on chapter 5. I would be the first to admit, the one on where you have the maps that Kira showed. So I have just a couple of points, not necessarily on that chapter itself, but congratulations. The report is highly readable, and I really like the district level maps. So congratulations to Andali, Kira, and Prabhu for putting together this report. So I want to talk about three things. One is markets. So we know that production diversity, and we know from the recent literature that agriculture cannot directly lead to reduction in stunting, etc. That would happen only through income pathway, if at all. What it does is improves dietary diversity. That linkage there is a lot of evidence for, and dietary diversity is a good thing. If there's one thing all nutritionists agree upon, that's one thing. Like the more diverse diet is. So markets will play a huge role in connecting production diversity to diet diversity. And recently in India, we have had 3 major reforms in wholesale agricultural markets. My comment is more forward-looking. If you look at the newspaper reports, etc., immediate responses to the market reforms and what it can do and what it can't do, there's a lot of camp. There is a lot of unresearched, without evidence, ideas, ideologies in it. I think as researchers, Cornell is a research group, so is IFPN, ICIRISAT, etc., and ICRISAT. It's very important that we engage in that research and highlight all the op-ed columns and the errors there and point out like what is possible. I personally am quite hopeful that these reforms are reforms in the right direction, and with a little bit more inputs from state governments and other agencies can help farmers, because without markets, kitchen gardens are fine, etc., but functioning markets are essential for farmers' welfare and also for consumers' welfare to connect. That's fine. Second is, I think whenever we talk about food systems in India, I think international trade in food is something we always overlook compared to, let's say, ASEAN. As India becomes richer and our population also grows, we will turn food importers. That's guaranteed. China is a net food importer, so will India become food importer if we grow rich, if our diets become rich, etc. Let's hope that we get richer. In that case, what should our food trade look like? If you look at our current food trade portfolio, we export virtual water, blue skies in form of rice. That's our biggest export. I'm excluding basmati for the moment. And our biggest import is edible oil, which has become very cheap and is leading, I think, is a part contributor to obesity epidemic that we are seeing in India. So over time, I think this pattern needs to change, and we need to export like China, more fish, more poultry, more labor-intensive products, and import more land-intensive and more water-intensive products. That change has to happen. And it will require a series of policy changes. Many of them are alluded to in your report, including better markets, better food safety, as Dr. Mahendra Dev referred. So those are my main 2 points. Third point, just paying for my East India nativity. Andaleep is also a Bihari. So Kira in her presentation talked about water and how East India can contribute to, East India has more water endowments and better electricity, etc. can support. I have been believing in that for 15, 16 years, ever since I started research. But most recent evidence from West Bengal, which did a large scale electrification of irrigation, and Bihar has also done in last few years, it seems that what Britishers believe, it seems irrigation has a smaller premium or a smaller additional surplus is generated in water-rich Eastern India compared to rest of India. So West Bengal electrified and did it with proper electricity tariff for water use, not Punjab, Haryana kind of electricity. But it hasn't led to any major change, any of the major improvements that you would expect in agricultural dynamism in the state. On the positive side, it hasn't also led to decline in water table. Actually, water tables have improved in that. So East India has the natural potential. One needs to think what is missing, that despite recent electrification in some of these states, we are not seeing the kind of transformation we saw in the last thing. Last point in the sub point in this point itself, in your maps, you see that the rice fallow areas are Odisha, Chhattisgarh, parts of MP, etc. This is also the region, Jharkhand. This is also the region where you have the least irrigation. These are the tribal belts, semi-tribal belts and models. We may need different models, and Pradhan Mantri Krisi Sinchai Yojana, etc. The money has been uniformly distributed across India. I think this region may need that support, maybe because this is the least irrigated region with some water, at least rainfalls. So a different kind of irrigation model may be required. And as researchers, we need to explore and generate options for the policymakers. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Avinash. I think the issue of food trade that you brought up is really important. And we must admit we haven't done much on looking at that linkages between food trade and food security. And it's, I think your proposal of looking at this trade-off between land-intensive crops and labor-intensive crops is a really interesting one. And that's definitely something that's worth thinking through some more. So thanks for that, and thanks for your comments. I'd like to have maybe 15 minutes if there's still enthusiasm in this room. We've gone beyond time, but if there's still some enthusiasm, I'd like to open up for discussion. We've had two forums for today. We've had a group of people on Zoom, around 30 or so, and then we had around 120 people on our Facebook live stream. And so we've got some questions that come up on the Zoom, but we also have questions that have come up on our Facebook live stream. So one immediate question, I think, Professor Ramesh Chand, there's a question straight for you on our chat from Professor Chandrasekhar from IEG. And I think the question is related to the issue that you brought up about, the supply of vegetables and fruit are increasing, but that's not effectively translating into consumption. So there is this gap between the increased supply, but not an adequate change in consumption. So what can we do about that? Is that a price issue? Is it an access issue? Where do you come out on that, and how does NITI Aayog think about that?
There are two aspects of it. One is what you said, data. There is really a mismatch. In fact, I have written that as one of my comments also, that there is mismatch, particularly between production data of fruit and vegetable, and if you use consumption data and considered other uses. So there is a mismatch between the two. But the fact remains that even NSSO data shows that per capita intake of fruit and vegetable is rising. Within that, there is an issue that the biggest increase you find in case of potato and onion, which may not be as good for nutrition as cauliflower or other kind of leafy vegetables are. So we just find that per capita consumption of vegetable is also increasing, but we don't see the increase in consumption commensurate with the increase in production, even if you factor in that export components. One of the reasons to my mind again would be this, as I said, that potato and onion are a big chunk of total vegetable basket. In fact, in India, potatoization of diet has happened when pulses intake was declining. This came as a replacement because Indian can't eat food without curry. So potato came as a ready substitute of pulses for large number of years. And we know about onion, that onion, if you see demand elasticity, it is equal to what is the price elasticity of demand for staples. So onion has become so important for Indian diet that small fluctuation in production lead to huge fluctuation in its prices. So, but onion,
Yeah.
we generally talk iron, calcium, and all those kind of things. So this is what I would like to respond to Chandrasekhar.
Thank you. Avinash, can I put you on the spot for a question that's come from Aline Mukherjee? And the question, I'm just going to paraphrase it because it's a long paragraph, but essentially the question is, how important is own production relative to commercial production for the diets of rural households and nutrition?
So, thanks, Prabhu. Though I see the question was, oh, now it is to everyone. Anyway,
yeah.
What we know is it depends on market links. So for perishable products, especially milk, we know that own production is strongly correlated with own consumption. Households that have cows or goats, mostly cows in India, cows and buffaloes, they tend to consume more because milk perishes within a few hours. But wherever you have cooperatives and other strong market linkages, you see less of it. So if we do find a strong correlation between production and consumption, that's almost, it shows that there are inefficiencies in the markets. If our markets were to work better, this won't happen. But given our current condition, especially for perishables, you see production and consumption are strongly. With cereals, rice and wheat too, there are some strong local preferences. So there's a recent survey by Penn State and others shows that, for example, in Bihar, households tend to consume self-produced rice and wheat, even though PDS allocation has improved. So market purchases goes down. It's not the self-consumption that goes down. So it's important. But if our markets improve, and let's hope after current reforms they do a little bit, you'll see that that link will weaken. And that's what we should work towards. That link, farmers should produce to maximize their income and consume to maximize whatever they're seeking to consume, maximize nutrition, taste, preferences, and others. That's the direction we should be working in. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And I think this one country, one market reform that's happening could improve that access.
Absolutely. We need to generate evidence, Prabhu, because there's a lot of canard regarding these reforms in newspapers, which is hurting these reforms even before it starts. A lot of just ideological positions. Yeah, thank you.
There's a second part to that, which was related to diets and how our diets of polished rice and refined sugar, etc., leading to increased obesity. And certainly that's an issue. And one of the things we argue in this report and also in many of our other publications is that, you know, the answer to undernutrition and overnutrition is the same one from a food systems point of view, and that is to increase the access to a more diversified food system, more diversified diet, and to increase the affordability of more nutritious food. And I think that's where much of the focus needs to be on improving access and increasing affordability of more nutritious food. Biofortification obviously comes into the story, But biofortification should not be seen as an exclusive solution, but rather one tool in the broader diversity of the food system.
But Prabhu, we need consumer awareness also that Dr. Ramesh Chand talked about. If you look at the rising consumption of snacks, beverages, and eating out, if for richer households, it's 3 times the consumption of fruits or more than even cereals, etc. And even for poor households. So beyond affordability, awareness also seems to be playing a role. And I think we should bring it squarely in our discussion.
Absolutely. Mahendra, you look like you're ready to say something.
No, I'm saying that, the prices matter. The sugar, packaged food and all much cheaper than the fruits, vegetables or eggs and those kind of things. So this is also important. I mean, just people buy packaged food and, which is leads to obesity and other things. So.
Yeah. It's always a puzzle that it's so much easier to find noodles in rural areas than to find fresh food. So that's always a challenge on how to see the supply chains and how one can duplicate those supply chains.
That's good.
So if I may
Prabhu, I think
come in there.
Hang on,
Sorry.
Ramesh, Jackie is going to come in.
Yeah, it was just to add on to the comment about processed food is storable. And in many cases, the fruits and the vegetables aren't. And you also find in some areas that there'll be a glut and you don't get the dietary diversity at any one time. You get it over a period of time, but it's the spoilage and the way that the instant foods are just there on the shelf and you don't have to plan to buy them because they can just sit there and you eat them when you want them. So I think that doesn't help. And they're low fiber as well. So not very filling. So you eat a lot of them.
Right. Thank you. Ramesh, you were going to add on.
Yeah, I only wanted to add that the advertisement, consumerism, it has affected demand to so much extent that even in places where food is available, like urban area, you just look at low-income household, their children, they will prefer to eat potato chips rather than eating 2 bananas. So it has, I think, penetrated entire India that consumer, they do not know that if they are eating potato chips instead of eating banana or any other fruit, they are not getting nutrition. So this nutrition literacy, nutrition awareness and role of advertisement, private sector, they are spending so much on advertisements. It's not that in rural area fruit and vegetable now are not available. Now you go to even remote part, you will find that you may not get all fruit or all vegetable, but you will find that there will be seasonal fruit and vegetable even in rural areas. So it's a matter of what choice people are making, and it's more complex issue that you just give 20 rupee to a child of a poor person and see, give him option, you buy from that shop what you like best. Then you see whether he's buying fruit or he's buying a potato chip packet. So that I think is very, very important in case of India. Parents' guidance, telling children what is important to eat. So those things are, I think, really matter a lot. And we as a researcher have not done anything on those.
Good point. I think also the opportunity cost of time for women plays a big role because the processed food is easier, faster to cook, and fresh food takes more time. And so there's a lot of issues on the gender dimension of this that also need to be addressed. And the researchers need to take more time looking at this, as Ramesh said. Dan, are there any questions on the Facebook side, or should we be wrapping up?
We do have a few questions from Facebook.
Can you pick one that you think is crucial?
Sure. So one specific question that came in says that micronutrient malnutrition is a key challenge due to widespread deficiency in soils and crops. In addition to sensitizing the stakeholders involved, what policy support would you advise to address this challenge and meet the SDG targets?
I think this is a Ramesh Chand question. As the policy.
No. You have done more work in this area than me. Yeah. But I will start it. I will again pick up same thing, that nutrition literacy, nutrition awareness. This is very, very important. And I just find that there is so much variation across household, that some of the places where ladies are well educated, they know about nutrition, the kind of food they are giving to their children is totally different than the kind of food which semi-literate lady or who do not have good awareness about these aspects are given. And in the case of India, maybe Mahinder Dev and Kishore will support me, or they will say I'm not right in thinking. Traditionally, Indians have very good knowledge of therapeutic value of food. If you eat this food, this will happen to your health. If you eat that food, this will what will happen. This food is garam, this food is thanda. So we have very good knowledge of those things. But I have never seen my parents or any other person telling me, if you eat this food, it has more iron. If you eat this food, it has more zinc. So I think in India, maybe for whatever reason, food was related more to health in terms of whether you are feeling good or not, and less in terms of this physical aspect of it.
That's a good point. I wonder whether if I asked American consumers whether they would know whether certain food has higher iron or higher vitamins, etc. Or whether this is more a universal knowledge deficit or just the deficit in India or in developing countries. But it's an important issue for bringing more knowledge about the food and the food system and the behavior change associated with it. That makes me come back to this, the value chain of processed foods relative to fresh food. You know, the way advertisements happen, you see fairly rapid taste changes and behavior changes associated with processed foods and with several brands. We don't have a mechanism for creating that kind of branding and messaging that goes to mass audiences. Much of the behavior change work that we're doing or the development community does on nutrition is very focused at the community level, women's self-help group levels, etc., rather than looking at mass advertising campaigns for changing behavior. I wonder whether there's some things we can learn from the commercial companies on how one can bring in those techniques and those messaging techniques into behavior change communication. Because I don't think we can go community by community. We need to go at millions of consumers level. That's a challenge that we all need to be thinking about. The social marketing techniques that just popped up on my screen from Chandrasekhar. We need to learn a lot more about that. But let me
the egg guys did. You remember the egg National Egg Coordination Committee? Sunday ho ya Monday, Roj Khao Ande. So that group, because there was an organized production group, they did it. Others haven't.
Right. I think that's a good research area for us to think about how effectively these programs are. Andali.
Yes, I mean, we talking about food policy, we keep forgetting that culture and food are very coterminous. They're very intimately connected globally, and more so in India. And how food consumption habits are also many a times status seeking, which affects what we consume, when we consume, which we often forget or omit while talking about food policies. And that's so hard to get rid of, right? Mm-hmm. If we have a guest in the family, what do we do in India? We just, that clearly says how we consume bad food or when we consume food which is unhealthy. So it's status seeking, an aspiration, and as a country of aspirational class, as well. So there is forces of modernization, but there are forces of status seeking at the same time, which determine what we eat, when we eat. Yeah,
that's a great point. And also the religious ceremonies and the foods
right.
that we eat are also not particularly healthy foods at certain times. Right. Kira, any last words from you? You're off.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody to attending this, and it's been really great to hear all of your reactions, especially to the cropping systems. And I hope to continue a discussion with some of you. If you have specific questions for me, you can feel free to email me or get in touch with me through the TCI website. And yeah, thank you all for your input. It was really interesting and insightful.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Andalit and Kira, for your great work on this report. As just to say that the report is available on the TCI website, tci.cornell.edu. Please visit the website. We've got a lot of other publications up there, including the latest report on the impact of COVID on food prices and nutrition that was released a couple of weeks ago. In terms of the FAN reports, we are working on 2 companion reports to the All India report. There's one FAN report specifically on Bihar that I'm now looking at as in the final stages of editing, and we'll be sending that to press in the next week or so. And we are hoping to have a launch on the Bihar report later this year, maybe possibly late September or in October, and a report on Orissa, a specific report on what's happening to food and nutrition in Orissa, which we hope to be able to release late October or early November. So these are the 2 bigger reports that we have planned for this year as follow-up to the food and nutrition report at the national level. And please keep in touch with us, and we will let you know as those launches happen. On our website, we have a link that will allow you to get newsletters from us. I'm sure you get lots of newsletters. Maybe you get one more from us and you can see the work we're doing. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of you. Thank you so much for being part of this program, and look forward to seeing you in future programs.